So we had the babies obviously by Caesar, and then they were taken straight away to the ICU, which is quite an awful thing. There's no cuddling, there's no happy affair where they lie on your chest or anything. They pretty much showed them to me and they were off. We were very happy to have a girl and a boy, so that was fantastic. We didn't know what we were having. We were obviously due roundabout in the middle of November, and I went into labour at 7 months, 31 weeks. And unfortunately, there's nothing you can plan for. Because I went into premature labour, it was very unexpected, and we had the babies on the day that I went into labour, so there was no opportunity to do any planning. They were in the ICU for 6 weeks after that. So in that way, it was a little bit of space to get nurseries ready and all the silly things that we hadn't even bothered doing up till that point. They tell me that I went into labour because the babies had an infection. It was obviously something that they only found out afterwards, but they do say that you wouldn't go into labour for no reason. It wasn't because I was too big, or I was huge, but it wasn't because I was too big. They only can deduce that because both babies had infection markers, but they don't know what the infection was, so they just pumped them full of antibiotics to get rid of the infection. But when they came out, they were sick. They had a variety of complications. It was a really rough road. Because they'd had cortisone injections at 28 weeks, their lungs weren't too bad, but Jamie's lungs struggled in the beginning, so we had a few scary moments with that. And then with her, she had some really awful. She had 2 pulmonary hemorrhages, which means she was bleeding into her lungs, and that was terrible. They phoned us at 5 in the morning to authorize blood transfusions, and told us the stories afterwards about how it was very, very close. So we're very fortunate to have her. I had to go in. It took a while for them to breastfeed. Fortunately, I had lots of milk, but you start off with expressing, and then they feed them through a nasal tube, and eventually, I think probably after 3 or 4 weeks, they started breastfeeding, and you start learning how to tandem breastfeed, which is very interesting, but necessary, because otherwise you'd spend your whole time feeding. So slowly but surely they were growing, and it was exhausting, because I had to, by the end, I was going into the hospital 3 times a day, and I've got a 2-year-old as well, so dividing my time between her and the hospital was quite stressful, but it was so worth it after all of the trials they'd been through. It was just good to see them getting happy and healthy. Yeah. My experience at Constantiaberg was amazing. I was so, so fortunate. They made what was a really, really awful experience. They made it so much better than it could have been.